Perhaps the most profound, tragic, and deeply unsettling tale in the series finds our monster on a bloody path of revenge against his creator. He's not a supernatural being, man-turned monster, or terrifying creature, but he was built to be one, by the hands of deranged genius trying to play God. He may be the greatest, yet most human, of these classic monsters, Frankenstein.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Wilson, we warned you.
After the massive success of Dracula beginning to turn around Universal's financial misfortunes, producer Carl Laemmle Jr. looked for a follow-up hit and found it in a play derived from Mary Shelley's seminal work. This stage adaptation essentially reduced Frankenstein's creation to a muttering, rage-filled animal, which transferred to an early draft of the script. Originally, Bela Lugosi, hot off his newfound stardom thanks to Dracula, was eyed for the pivotal role. However, upon seeing the unsophisticated nature of the early draft, turned it down, which in turn caused original director Robert Florey to leave the project. After producer Carl Laemmle Jr. watched the dailies for Waterloo Bridge, both starring Frankenstein's May Clark and shot by Frankenstein's director of photography Arthur Edson, director James Whale was offered to direct the upcoming horror picture. In taking over the project, he rewrote the script, allowing for a more sympathetic, albeit still silent monster, which he had yet to find. And find him he did in actor Boris Karloff, who, despite appearing in nearly 80 films already, was still relatively unknown. Along with Karloff's, as Whale put it, strong facial structure, the look of Frankenstein's monster came down to the inventiveness of makeup artist Jack Pierce, who, after only being allowed to apply the bare minimum amount of makeup to Bela Lugosi, was dying to show his creative talents again. Everything was purposeful, from the sunken eyes to the bolts in the neck, and even the flattened skull, which Pierce added after looking at medical books on how to remove the top of a head, and reasoned that Dr. Frankenstein might have just removed the top in the easiest manner possible in order to insert a new brain, and maybe just slap on another lid. Jack Pierce would go on to lend his talents to many other classic monsters, notably Bride of Frankenstein. From the novel, Mary Shelley's physical description of the creature is left intentionally vague, stating only that he possessed dull, yellow skin, black hair and lips, and white teeth. This has led to many widely different takes on the monster, from cinema's days of infancy with J. Cyril Dawley's 1910 silent film produced by Thomas Edison's studio, to 1994's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Following the success of Francis Ford Coppola's take on Dracula, Kenneth Branagh directed and starred in this more plot-accurate to the novel adaptation, and co-starred Robert De Niro as the monster.
Why do you weep? He was my father.
Needless to say, Jack Pierce's iconic design, along with a haunting performance from Boris Karloff, ingrained the 1931 version of Frankenstein in the public's mind, and remains as the definitive version. Now, speaking of the many different adaptations, there is one detail from the novel that is scarcely gotten right: the name of the creature himself. While he is mostly nameless, he does refer to himself as Adam, a detail that, of all versions, was included in 2014's I, Frankenstein. Much like Dracula before it, Whale's adaptation of Frankenstein kept only the bare bones of the original source material, and not only omitted but changed nearly every aspect of the story, resembling the novel in name only, a name which was also changed, swapping the two leading men so that the story's protagonist would have a less harsh-sounding name to American audiences. However, despite the large departure from the novel, and much like its predecessor, Frankenstein managed to capture the essence of the book in ways that no other film ever has, that transcend simply following the plot to the letter. The film has a much more classic style of photography than previous monsters Dracula, in both its lighting design and in its framing, which work in the film's favor, showing an incredible pairing between director and cinematographer, a pairing that would find repeated success in another classic monster film. Now let's take a look at the visuals and see just what made Frankenstein the classic that it is today, starting with its grim opening scene. We start on a close-up on a pair of hands and then tilting up and panning to the right across the attendees of a funeral. We cut to close-ups of Frankenstein and then to full shots of the Undertaker throwing dirt on a coffin. Throughout this breakdown, pay attention to how and when the camera moves, as it is in stark contrast to how Carl Freud moves his camera, where the movements of the camera in Dracula were motivated by feelings and the emotions of characters, with dolly shots generally reserved to show the influence of Dracula, almost hypnotizing the audience along with the characters. The camera movements in Frankenstein are based around action, highlighting the drama of the characters' decisions as if we, the viewer, are right there with them, following along with them in their journey. The lighting design mocks the setting sun as the source, with a massive painted backdrop that is uplit, or lit from the ground up, to help sell the setting sun effect. The characters are all each then lit in relation to their placement to the sunset. There are large fill lights hung above, illuminating all the actors to give just enough fill light to see them, as is evidenced by the shadows on each of their faces. This is done just to give visibility, as the key lights coming from behind mocking sunlight would leave all the actors completely silhouetted and would not have given the camera, especially in 1931, enough information to pick up on their faces. So while not 100% photorealistic, it is an incredible example of blending tone and mood with an aesthetically pleasing image, and with the practical needs of the production and the limitations of the day. Now, speaking of the limitations of the day, while obvious to the modern viewer watching in high definition, the opening scene provides a near-perfect example of how to make the most of photographing a fake background with its painted sunset backdrop. Notice that it avoids showcasing it too prominently, relegating the backdrop to being just that, adding not only actors to the foreground of the shot, but several types of props both to the foreground and to different stages of the midground so as to create as much depth within the shot as possible. Additionally, the lighting is used to great effect, enhancing the look of the sunset to help sell the realism of the shot. Next, let's take a look at the absolutely brilliant introduction of the monster himself. Beginning on a wide shot as he enters, the monster walks in backwards, almost like a frightened child, only to turn and then reveal that in his face, he's anything but. As we cut to a series of close-ups on his ghastly, yet sorrowful face. The lighting design, again while not completely photorealistic, is simply incredible, giving him an unforgettable entrance. The room behind him is lit with more uplighting to help give separation from the background to the dark figure emerging from it. On the monster himself, there are two fill lights, one from the right side of frame as seen by the shadow he casts on the wall, and one directly above, highlighting the top of his head and giving a slight shadow from the top of his brow and nose. Then, as he turns, he steps into the key light coming from the left side of frame and angled just slightly upward, further enhancing the shock value of the moment. When we move back to the wide shot, the camera tracks to the side, again following motion and helping to obscure the next key light for the scene. As Frankenstein's monster sits in the chair, the film proves with a deceptively simple scene that despite plot inaccuracies, it was able to capture the deepest understanding of the text out of any of the versions ever put to film. Frankenstein, in his falsely held belief that he has mastered his creation and can control it at will, throws open a light from above, but instead of simply looking up towards it, his monster stands out to reach it. Upon seeing this, Frankenstein shuts out the light, prompting his creation to reach out now to him with his hands turned upwards, pleading for it back. This one scene perfectly captures the essence of both of their characters and their relationship to one another in the story, with Frankenstein's arrogance and naivety, not truly understanding the nature of his own creation, and the monster, who, despite his desire to look upwards towards a light, is thrown back into a life of darkness by both society, and his maker, pleading for just a small portion of this back. To create this look, multiple lights were hung high above the set, as you can see here in this photo. One last aspect of Frankenstein's visual style I would like to note is that it never seems to glorify the aspects of genuine horror in the story, but rather presents them as such, letting the moments breathe and allowing the audience just to take in what they saw. Take, for example, the infamous scene with Maria, a scene that was initially removed, and, along with the dark subject matter of the film, caused it to be banned in several parts of the world. The scene begins on a medium shot following the creature before he runs into the little girl. It then plays out quite naturally, with an establishing shot of the two, then staying on medium shots throughout the scene, lit mostly naturally with only a small bit of fill light to add to the scene. Tempting as it might be to try to enhance the drama of the scene with sweeping camera movements or dramatic lighting, the film is smart enough to simply show the audience the scene in the most natural way, and by this contrast only further adds to its deeply upsetting nature. Frankenstein is an unbelievably sophisticated film, standing the test of time and proving still to be among the greatest horror films ever made.
Frankenstein was, and still is, an incredible film in every sense of the word. Thank you for joining me on this look back at Frankenstein, and I invite you to tune in next time as I continue my series on the monsters of Universal.